I want to bring into focus now Congressman Michael McCaul of Texas, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and member of the Homeland Security Committee. Great to have you. Before we went to CB's report, I mentioned those flights. They call them ghost flights, and they started back in the middle part of 2022. And I remember then Governor and current Governor Ron DeSantis saying, here's what happens with these flights. There's no notification to the state of Florida. They're done mostly in the middle of the night, and it's clandestine. They were moving illegal immigrant children around the country on these flights, the federal government. That never gets talked about. It's like, oh, that didn't happen.
No. Yeah, in fact, I was down at the border last week, took a delegation, Texans down there, then to Mexico City, but on both flights. But the one out of McCaul, we had all these illegal immigrants on the plane with us. And it was very clear. And people don't realize this has been happening for the last 2.5 years. 8 million encounters with no legal status. I don't know, for God's sakes, what we're going to do with them. And you've highlighted the destruction that Secretary Mayorkas has caused by these policies. And there are no consequences, as the police officer said. Without consequences, you're going to see more violence.
Well, you know, this is happening now in Democrat-led cities where they have relaxed policies, soft on crime. So basically, these illegal immigrants are being treated just like American criminals.
Well, I applaud my governor for giving cities like New York and, Denver, maybe Martha's Vineyard, a little bit of taste of what we deal with in Texas every single day and the cost that we absorb in Texas. We are really the front lines of this invasion, if you will, that's taking place. And that's why, that's why we impeached Secretary Mayorkas just last night at about 1:30 in the morning, is because he told his Border Patrol agents, with respect to aggravated felonies, not to take into account those convictions to detain. Now, Congress passed a law, you shall detain for aggravated felonies. These are violent felons that drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, yet Mayorkas was allowing them to get into the country, telling his agents they had no discretion.
And telling the country that they were being vetted, because that's what he's been saying in the hearing. So, but a man who would lose track of, for DHS, the whereabouts of 85,000 migrant children probably isn't going to keep up with the criminals very well either.
Well, and the children are the biggest human tragedy. When I go to see detention centers of the children who are being exploited by the cartels. And this whole human tragedy was created by the Biden administration.
Let's get into the impeachment process now. And just some of what was going on overnight and how you got to the point that you did with Mayorkas.
Two articles of impeachment. One, failure to enforce the law. As I mentioned, Congress said with respect to aggravated violent felons, they shall detain. It doesn't say discretionary. It says mandatory shall detain. So Mayorkas in a DHS memorandum says, hey, Border Patrol, I don't want you to take into account their prior convictions in your determination to detain, which means he took their discretion away and was releasing into our society very violent criminals coming into this country. To me, that is an abdication of his federal responsibilities, oath of office. The second article was breach of trust. The founding fathers said a breach of trust with the American people was sufficient. I'll give you a good example. They talked about how the Supreme Court Justice Story says, imagine an admiral who would not defend the high seas. That is impeachable. And that's precisely what Mayorkas is doing. He's not defending air, land, and sea.
What you make me think of, though, if you knowingly let criminals into the country, does that even go beyond impeachment? I mean, if you are allowing the enemy to harm us, that sounds like treason. But we'll move on. The Wall Street Journal editorial board is taking some issue with this, though. It says impeaching Mayorkas achieves nothing. A better idea is to strike a deal with Mr. Biden on serious border security reforms that would restrict his discretion on parole, rewrite the asylum standard, and give the executive other tools to control the border. If Mayorkas and Biden refuse to use them, the GOP will have an election issue, and the tools will be there for the next president to use. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, I understand what they're saying, but the president already has those tools. For God's sakes, remain in Mexico was a 30-year-old statute that the Trump administration utilized. He has plenty of tools at his discretion. All the executive orders that he rescinded from the prior administration, he could go back to those policies that were working, and that means end, catch, and release, remain in Mexico, and start building the wall again. He shut that whole thing down. And we can pass something here. I'd be happy to vote for significant political asylum reform. But the fact is the president has that authority by Congress already today.
Chairman, real quickly before I let you go, what happens next for Mayorkas or to Mayorkas?
Well, we will be bringing the impeachment articles to the floor, perhaps as early as next week. For an up or down vote. He'd be the first cabinet officer impeached since Ulysses S. Grant administration, to put it in context. But we believe that it's very warranted in this case. When I go home, to get to the Wall Street Journal article, we are sending a strong statement to the administration and to the secretary that we disapprove of his conduct and his violation of oath of office to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
It'll be interesting to see if some of those so-called sanctuary cities and Democrat-led cities that feel the pressure of what's coming from the border now, if they'll join you. All right, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for being in focus.